best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is an interesting question, mainly because I've had this conversation with a number of people within comics, and so it touches on that. So this is going to be one of those videos where I try and answer the question, also thread it without getting into too much of the personal conversation I've had with people. But let's roll that out. Okay. So here's the mail from a viewer. It says, "Hey Perch, appreciate your show and everything you do. You make the drive home more interesting. Thank you very much for that. My question is, do you believe that people within comics regret some of their actions that they've taken over the past several years? The online feuds, the screaming at fans. Take, for example, Mark Waid. His profile does not seem as high as it was 10, 15 years ago. Do you think on some level he regrets getting into that giant fight with Zach over the comic when really it didn't seem to help him, arguably hurt him? Curious to get your take on this. What do you think about regret in the comic industry?" It's almost two topics there. Okay, so interesting message. So I think you can take this on several levels, and I'll say right out the gate, because this will be the thing that I think will hang people up a bit in the comments. There's a big difference between feeling regret and learning from your mistakes. And it's one of the most common things about social media. I mean, there's lots of people in all topics, not just comics, although certainly within comics, where people feel regret for getting into flame wars, for attacking people, for getting into dumb arguments. I mean, there's tons of regret that people have. But rarely, meaning never, does it actually change their behavior so they don't get themselves into the exact situation again and again and again. To the point. Having talked to some editors in the past at Marvel, I know one editor in particular is deeply regrets and wishes that she had not, posted tweets during the Trump election with things like, "We'll remember who you voted for." However, the tweets stayed up and similar tweets have been made since. And so even though there's regret there's not really an understanding of, hey, I should do it differently next time. Now, maybe that's a little unfair because the last election, the Trump-Biden election, there was a lot less hysteria as the entire Trump-Clinton, both before and after that election, some of the tweets made. It did diminish with the newer election. Perhaps some of that's because Biden won. I think there is a certain scenario where, if a Republican wins, I think we're about to see that. If in the midterms it goes as people expect, and the Republicans take back the House and potentially the Senate, then I think that we'll see we'll see a deluge of super, crazy over the top, the world's ending, democracy is over, all that stuff is dead kind of posts. And generally that's because, a lot of the people posting, and I mean no offense, these are not highly intelligent political pundits. They're good at what they do. They're maybe good at, what they do inside of comics. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But in terms of being able to not gaslight, go over the top with things like democracy is over kind of comments, there'll be a little bit more restraint. But anyway, it is what it is. So I know there's some regret there for sure. But again, I think a lot of the regret comes into it's the kind of regret that says, I wish I hadn't got caught doing this bad thing that caused me trouble. It's not, I wish I hadn't done that bad thing in the first place. That's how a lot of it has kind of filtered out into people's minds. Now, granted, there is a whole host of creators out there who just enjoy the negative attention. I mean, put quite frankly, Mags is somebody that is a, kind of like me. I do a lot of shit posting on Twitter, but my shit posting usually comes in the form of, making fun of variant covers and, hey, here's a cover of Batman eating a Tide Pod to celebrate the Tide Pod challenge from a few years ago. That's the kind of stuff that I do. That's my level of harmless. I don't know if it's harmless, but nonsensical shit posting. That's what I do. Mags, for example, will do the Kurt Cobain is trans and then go like all in on that. And Mags is aware that this is a controversial kind of egging on kind of behavior. It's like the creators who will go at the Zack Snyder fans. I mean, I don't know why that's entertaining or enjoyable to people. I make funny art in the hopes of, that it provides a cheap laugh. That's what I do it. I don't know why, somebody would decide to go to war over, is Kurt Cobain trans or not? Obviously, he's not trans, and he's dead, and it's disrespectful anyway. Like, why would you even want to wander into that? It's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. If you're a bullfighter and that's your profession, cool. But if you are just some drunken idiot doing that, then you're just asking to get plowed by that bull. And that's to a large extent, you take somebody like Mags. I think that sums up a lot of what Mags does on social media. It's there for attention. It's there to generate a reaction. I have no idea if Mags, regrets that stuff later or not. I would suspect when it gets too much bad attention, she regrets it. But that's kind of the game Mags is playing, and that's what a lot of people on social media do. They do it for attention. But if you're talking about, say, Mark Waid, I know for firsthand, secondhand, bordering on firsthand. I don't know, somewhere in between there, 1.5 hand. I know that Mark Waid regrets a lot of things he's done over the years. There is a certain aspect to his personality that is a compulsive personality. Before the entire, the dividing line that would go on between Waid and Zach, there was a lot of creators would tell you the same thing. Waid would do over the top things that many other creators found alarming and didn't appreciate or like, and it wasn't, people weren't fond of that behavior. But and Waid knew it. He had, and as far as I know, still has the personality of being hot headed, shooting his mouth off before he was really aware of what he was saying, and getting himself into situations where he would have to go apologize, or he would realize he burned some bridges. I mean, there's plenty of companies and people who will just silently not work with Mark Waid, and it has nothing to do with anything more recently he did with Zach, but years of behavior before then. There's that this isn't a common thing. Now, a lot of people don't go out there and say, yeah, Mark Waid, I wouldn't hire him for a project, because too many, yokels on Twitter would turn around and be like, oh, so you support Nazis. I mean, there'd be this whole, nonsense argument. So that's why people just quietly, in many cases, have resisted hiring him. Now, right now, he's on this World's Finest book. It's actually a pretty entertaining read right now with Batman and Superman. It's silly in cases, but it's fun. It's a fun comic book, fun comic read. Comics need more things like that. It feels like we're on this cycle where Waid will be on that book for a little while. DC will continue to do what DC does, and ultimately the book will get canceled for one reason or another. That will depress and irritate Waid. He will then, in the weeks to follow, go and pick a fight with someone. It will go over the top, and and then the cycle will repeat itself. I feel like feels like we've been on that track for a while. It's just kind of personality he has. But yes, Waid absolutely does regret things, and I can say, I think with decent, knowledge, that Waid regrets getting into that entire fight with Zach. It was not beneficial to him. It was a lot of legal kind of stuff, and I think Waid also realizes that all the attention that came off of that for him, meaning people on quote unquote on his side that helped raise money, that said this is why CG is a hate group. All those people didn't equate to work in the comic industry. It didn't equate to jobs. It didn't equate to financial stability. And I think but bear in mind, I don't think Waid disagrees with what he said. I think Waid still stands by his point of view on all this, but I think he regrets getting into the fight in the first place, for sure. I don't think he would ever admit that in public, and that's fine. I think he would admit that in small circles. Yes, I could say with good authority he would. But it's that difference between, do you regret that you got in trouble, or do you regret that you caused the trouble? And for most people, they regret that they got in trouble. It's one of the important things you learn as a parent when you're with kids, is if you want to raise them right, or you want to if you're trying to raise good children, you have to teach them the difference between it's bad to do the bad thing versus it's bad to get caught. If you get kids who who really gravitate to the it's bad to get caught, then they're very likely to get themselves into trouble. By the way, conversely, and I have zero insider information on this, and I haven't asked, and I don't. This is all my pure speculation. I'd be willing to bet that on the other end, I would be willing to bet Zach regrets getting himself involved in that whole situation as well. And before you say in the comments like, well, he didn't, it got forced upon him. I'm just saying the entire everything. I mean, I have no personal information on this either, but I would guess that Peter Samedi, way back in the day, getting involved in that whole fuss, if he could go back in time and not do it, I suspect he would as well. Again, for his reasons, just because it's a distraction. I think it caused a huge distraction to what he was trying to accomplish as a business, and it brought in other supporters, so that's fine. But it's just, in general, a lot of this social media war, a lot of this social conflict, a lot of it has been a massive distraction to people. And that distraction has not turned out to be, financially beneficial. It hasn't turned out to lead to better opportunities. It's just been distracting. And so I think collectively, almost everyone in comics would love it if they could just, stop. If they could just kind of back away and almost erase many of the things that went on over the last, 6 to 8 years. I think that, again, it's that difference between there are people out there who are there for the fight. They're entertained by the fight. They enjoy the drama. I do believe Mags enjoys the attention of the drama. I think that's part of what, gets her up in the morning and gets her moving. I think, again, I have no knowledge one way or another, but I would guess that Vita enjoys the reaction to some of the things that Vita posts. But then I think there are others who just view a lot of it as tiring, view a lot of it as it was good in the moment, but it didn't lead to anything. It just got people riled up, and there was no benefit to it. I think you'd take a guy like Donny Cates, who at times has posted things and had fights with fans over one thing or another. And I think there's another case where it's a guy who regrets getting himself into that situation. But I think, from my observation, at least seeing how the tweets and everything roll out, I think he's helpless to keep himself from getting involved in the situation. I think even though he regrets it, he finds himself there anyway, consistently. And that's the challenge that he's got. Anyway, overall, I think comics is probably filled with a lot of regrets. The creators, the editors, people involved, I think there's a lot of impulsive actions that get taken. I think that people, it's just, and this is all part of where, if it was a more mature company, or even just more stable, you would have mentors, you would have, people who are there inside the company to help prevent, creators from going off the deep end. Right now, if some artist or writer goes on Twitter and starts shooting their mouth off and acting like a lunatic, no one's going to be there to say, hey, but watch out, you're even though I agree with whatever you're saying politically, socially, even though I agree with what you're saying, you're acting like a crazy person, and this isn't going to go well for you. Nobody really does that. Nobody really steps in. There are a couple people, believe it or not, like Simon Bisley apparently is a really great kind of mentor, father figure to some creators, who's like, hey, let me help you from, doing something you're going to regret. I think there's a handful of people out there like that, who stepped in and tried to kind of tap people on the shoulder and just say, hey, here's how you steer yourself out of trouble. But then there's other people out there who cheer it on, particularly on the lower end. I mean, you see, if you ever see like I don't know, Josh Williamson posted something fairly benign, but if you read it kind of sideways and crossed your eyes, you could take it as like a shot against, CG or a group like that. It wasn't, but it was just kind of like, I don't remember. It was like, treat people with respect. I don't know, something along those lines. Good, just general advice. Treat people with respect. And you saw a number of lower level, arguably like failed comic creators in their replies going, yeah, go take it to those Nazis over there. Like they were trying to poke him to stir up a fight, or at least take his words and make them more than what they were. And that's, in these situations, you have all these people who are just cheering you on to have a fight. In the most cynical possible view that I might have, My feeling is there's a handful of some of these lower level comic creators, people who are, are failed in what they've tried to do, who know that they have no hope of a big career. I think like a Tess Fowler sometimes fits into that category. I think in gaming, you have like a Brianna Wu who fits into that category. People who are like, they know that they're not going to have the big career in whatever field they chose. And so their new role is to kind of be around and, almost drag everybody else down. That's how it feels at times. When I see a comic creator who's kind of trying to egg another comic creator on, like, I know what you mean. These guys are jerks, right? Good for you to have you with us. Let's go kick these people while they're down. That's the kind of behavior that goes on. And to me, those people are lost. Just they're lost individuals who the only enjoyment they get out of life now is to try and drag people down to their level. And I think there's a handful of those people out there, unfortunately. And we need more of the other kind. We need more of the Simon Bisleys, the people who are going to be out there who are trying to keep people out of trouble. I mean, good God, think about where we are in this comic industry, where the guy who drew absolutely offensive pictures of Lobo murdering Santa Claus is the voice of reason for a lot of comic creators. Bisley's a wonderful guy, but that's kind of where we are. So yes, I do think there's a lot of regret, but I don't know if there's a lot of understanding. And it's kind of the sad thing for me, the deep sigh that I get a lot of the time is I just wish. It's hard to watch people make the same mistakes over and over and over. And if there's one thing about comics that feels true, it's that a lot of people fit into that category where they just it's like a compulsion. They cannot help themselves. They just make the same mistake over and over and over, and history just keeps repeating itself. And that's I don't know, that part's the hard part for me to watch anyway. Anyway, thank you for the question. Good question. Curious to see what people think. Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for listening.